In 1998, Michael Douglas was having dinner at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Beverly Hills when a young waiter accidentally spilled red wine on a customer's $3,000 Armani suit. It was an accident, the kind of thing that happens in restaurants every single day. But what happened next was not an accident. The restaurant manager grabbed the waiter by his collar, dragged him into the center of the dining room, and fired him in front of 40 guests. The waiter's name was Daniel Ochoa, 23 years old, working double shifts for 6 months to pay for his mother's chemotherapy treatments. This job was the only thing standing between his family and bankruptcy. Daniel stood there in the middle of that dining room, tears streaming down his face, while the manager screamed at him about incompetence, about stupidity, about how he would never work in this city again. 40 people watched. 40 people said nothing, except one. Michael Douglas had been sitting 3 tables away with his wife, Catherine Zeta-Jones. They had been celebrating their engagement, a quiet dinner, a private moment, until it wasn't. What Michael Douglas did in the next 90 seconds would make that manager resign before the end of the night, and the waiter, who was dragged into the center of the dining room in shame. He now owns one of the most successful restaurants in Los Angeles. But here's what nobody knows. Daniel Ochoa still has something Michael Douglas gave him that night, something he's kept in his wallet for over 25 years. Stay with me. If stories like this move you, subscribe right now and tell me where you're watching from today. To understand what happened in that restaurant, you need to understand where it happened. La Maison de Laurent was not just a restaurant. It was a temple, a shrine to French cuisine and old Hollywood glamour. The waiting list was 3 months long. A single dinner for 2 could cost more than most people's monthly rent. Presidents had eaten there, movie stars, billionaires, and Philippe Renard, the manager, never let anyone forget it. Philippe had run La Maison de Laurent for 15 years. He was French, arrogant, obsessed with perfection. He treated his staff like soldiers, and he was the general. One mistake, one tiny imperfection, and you were out. He had fired waiters for using the wrong fork, fired busboys for speaking too loudly, fired a sommelier for recommending a wine that a customer didn't like. In Philippe's world, the staff existed to be invisible. They existed to serve. They existed to make the wealthy guests feel like gods, and gods don't tolerate mistakes. Daniel Ochoa had been working at La Maison de Laurent for 8 months. Best job he ever had. The tips alone were more than he made in a year at his previous restaurant. But Daniel wasn't working for tips. He was working for his mother. Rosa Ochoa had been diagnosed with breast cancer in 1997. The treatments were working, but they were expensive. Even with insurance, the family owed over $40,000 in medical bills. Daniel's father worked construction. His younger sister was still in high school. Daniel was the only one who could make real money. So he worked, double shifts, 6 days a week. He barely slept. He barely ate. He gave every extra dollar to his mother's treatment. That November night started like any other. Daniel arrived at 4 in the afternoon. He had been up since 5 that morning, taking his mother to a treatment appointment. He was exhausted, running on coffee and willpower, but he couldn't afford to take a night off. At 8:15, a man named Victor Harrington arrived. Real estate developer, multi-millionaire, regular customer, and, as every waiter at La Maison de Laurent knew, a complete nightmare. Victor complained about everything: the temperature, the bread, the ice in his water glass. He had sent back steaks cooked exactly as he ordered them. He was rude, dismissive, condescending, and he never tipped more than 10%. But Victor Harrington spent a lot of money. In Philippe's eyes, He was exactly the kind of customer the restaurant existed to serve. Daniel had served Victor 3 times before. Each time was a nightmare. But he had survived. He could do it again. He had to. If this story is touching your heart, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happened next is something this restaurant tried to cover up for over 2 decades. At 8:45, Daniel was carrying a tray with Victor's wine, a bottle of 1990 Chateau Margaux, $600. He had done this 1,000 times. He could carry a full tray through a crowded dining room with his eyes closed. But Daniel hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. His mother's treatment that morning had been difficult. She had cried. Daniel had held her hand and promised everything would be okay. He was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. As Daniel approached table 12, his foot caught on the edge of a chair, a tiny snag, half an inch of leather sole against polished wood. He stumbled, the tray tilted, and $600 of Bordeaux slid off and shattered against the table, sending red wine across the white tablecloth, and directly onto Victor Harrington's $3,000 Armani suit. The silence that followed was absolute. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Victor looked down at his suit, red wine spreading like blood. His face went from shock to rage in less than a second. Daniel stood frozen, empty tray in hands, watching his career, his mother's treatment, his family's future, all draining away with that wine. "I'm sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. You'll pay?" Victor's voice was loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? Do you have any idea who I am?" Philippe appeared out of nowhere. The moment the wine hit Victor's suit, he was already moving. "What happened here?" Daniel started to explain. "Mr. Renard, I tripped. The chair—" But Philippe wasn't listening to Daniel. He was looking at Victor Harrington, calculating the cost of losing this customer, and in that calculation, Daniel Ochoa was worth nothing. Philippe grabbed Daniel by the collar. The fabric bunched in his fist. He pulled Daniel into the center of the dining room, under the crystal chandelier, where everyone could see. And then Philippe Renard did something that would haunt Daniel for years. Before I tell you what Philippe did, you need to understand something. Daniel could have fought back. He was young, strong, bigger than Philippe. But fighting back meant losing his job immediately. Assault charges, never working again. It meant watching his mother's treatment stop. So Daniel stood there, collar twisted in Philippe's fist, and he took what was coming. "You are finished," Philippe hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do you understand? Finished in this restaurant, finished in this city. I will personally make sure no restaurant in Los Angeles ever hires you again." Daniel's vision blurred with tears. "Mr. Renard, please. My mother is sick. I need this job. I'll do anything." "Your mother?" Philippe laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Your mother is not my problem. Your incompetence is my problem." He shoved Daniel backward. Daniel stumbled, caught himself on a table. "Get out! Get out of my restaurant. I don't want to see your face again." Daniel looked around the dining room. 40 people, every single one watching, and not a single person said a word. He started walking toward the exit. His legs felt like concrete, and then a voice cut through the silence. "If you're still with me, you're amazing. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in that restaurant. Because what happened next changed everything." "Excuse me." The voice was calm, controlled, but it carried across the silent dining room like a bell. Philippe turned. Daniel stopped. Every head swiveled toward table 9. Michael Douglas was standing up. He was wearing a simple black blazer over a white shirt. Catherine Zeta-Jones sat beside him, watching. Michael had been planning to propose properly that night. A quiet moment, a private celebration. Instead, he had just watched a manager destroy a young man in front of 40 people for an accident, and something inside him snapped. Michael walked toward Philippe and Daniel. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. The chandelier cast prismatic light across his face. He stopped about 5 feet away. "What's your name?" He wasn't looking at Philippe. He was looking at Daniel. Daniel Ochoa. Michael nodded. "Daniel, what happened here tonight?" "It was an accident. I tripped. I didn't mean to." Michael held up his hand. "I saw what happened. You tripped. It was an accident." He turned to Felipe. "And then you dragged this young man into the middle of your restaurant and humiliated him in front of everyone." Felipe's face was turning red. "Mr. Douglas, with all respect, this is a personnel matter. This does not concern you." Michael smiled, but the smile had no warmth in it. "Actually, it does concern me, because I'm standing right here. I saw what happened, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't." Philippe lowered his voice. "Mr. Douglas, perhaps we should discuss this privately. That man ruined a customer's $3,000 suit. Someone has to be held accountable. A suit can be cleaned." Michael didn't lower his voice. He wanted everyone to hear. A person's dignity can't be restored that easily. He looked around the dining room. 40 people. "Do you know what I just watched? I watched a manager physically grab an employee, drag him into the center of a room, and fire him while screaming insults." He paused. "That's not accountability. That's abuse." Felipe's face went from red to purple. "Mr. Douglas, I must ask you to apologize to this young man, right now, in front of everyone, the same way you humiliated him in front of everyone." The silence was suffocating. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. "I will do no such thing, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave my restaurant." Michael didn't move. Instead, he turned to Victor Harrington, still dabbing at his ruined suit. "Sir, what's your name?" Victor looked up, startled. "Victor. Victor Harrington." "Victor, that's a nice suit." "Was a nice suit. I'm sorry it got ruined. But I'm curious. Did you really need this young man to be publicly humiliated and fired to make you feel better about a dry cleaning bill?" Victor's face went pale. No words came out. Michael turned back to Philippe. "Here's what's going to happen. First, I'm going to pay for whatever damage was done tonight. The suit, the wine, whatever it costs." He pulled out a stack of bills and set them on the nearest table. "Second, you're going to give Daniel his job back, with an apology." Philippe shook his head. "That's not going to happen." "Then third, I'm going to walk out of here and call every journalist I know. By tomorrow morning, every newspaper in Los Angeles will have the story of how La Maison de Laurent's manager physically assaulted and publicly humiliated a young man whose mother is dying of cancer." Michael paused. "I wonder how that will affect your 3-month waiting list." The color drained from Felipe's face. "You wouldn't. Try me." The standoff lasted 7 seconds. Felipe looked at Michael, at the 40 guests, at Daniel, standing there with tears on his face. And he made a decision. "Daniel," his voice was stiff, "I apologize. I overreacted. Please report for your next shift as scheduled." Daniel stared at him. "I'm not fired?" "No, you're not fired." Michael stepped closer to Daniel. "Actually, I think Daniel deserves a little more than that. Don't you, Philippe?" Philippe's jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "Daniel, how long have you been working here?" 8 months. And in that time, I'm guessing you've never gotten a raise. Daniel shook his head. I think Daniel deserves a raise, and tomorrow night off, with pay, to spend time with his mother. Philippe looked like he was about to have a stroke. Mr. Douglas, I cannot simply— Yes, you can, and you will. Or we're back to option 3, 20% raise. Tomorrow night off, with pay. The silence stretched. Then Philippe nodded. A tiny, defeated movement. Fine. Michael turned to Daniel and smiled. A real smile this time. Congratulations on your raise, Daniel. Daniel couldn't speak. He just stood there, tears streaming down his face. And Michael Douglas did something that made the entire restaurant gasp. He hugged him. Right there, in the middle of La Maison de Laurent, Michael Douglas hugged a 23-year-old waiter and whispered something in his ear. Something nobody else could hear. Something Daniel Ochoa would remember for the rest of his life. Philippe Renard resigned from La Maison de Laurent 6 weeks later. The story had spread. His reputation as a tyrant became too much to ignore. He never managed another restaurant in Los Angeles again. Victor Harrington paid for his own dry cleaning. He also left a $100 tip for Daniel that night. The most he had ever tipped anyone. Daniel Ochoa kept his job for another 2 years. The raise allowed him to catch up on his mother's medical bills. Rosa Ochoa beat cancer in 2001. She is still alive today. In 2008, Daniel opened his own restaurant. It's still open, 3-month waiting list. In 2019, a journalist tracked Daniel down. He was 44 years old, successful, respected. The journalist asked about that night in 1998. Daniel reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellow with age, soft from years of handling. Michael gave me this that night, right after he hugged me. He unfolded it carefully. It was a napkin from La Maison de Laurent. On it, in Michael Douglas's handwriting, were 12 words. You are worth more than any suit. Don't let anyone tell you different. Daniel folded the napkin and put it back. I've carried this for 21 years. Every time I wanted to give up. Every time someone told me I wasn't good enough. I take out this napkin, and I remember. The journalist asked what he remembered. That on the worst night of my life, a complete stranger stood up for me when nobody else would. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me anything. But he saw something wrong, and he refused to look away. Daniel paused. That's the kind of person I try to be now. The journalist asked one final question. What would Daniel say to Michael Douglas today? I would say thank you, not just for saving my job, for showing me what courage looks like, for proving that one person can make a difference. He held up the napkin. I've read these 12 words every day since 1998, and every day they remind me who I want to be. Michael Douglas has never spoken publicly about that night. When asked years later, he said simply, I saw something wrong. I said something. That's what you're supposed to do. But the people who were there remember it differently. They remember a movie star standing up in the middle of a crowded restaurant, walking toward a crying waiter, saying the words nobody else would say. And they remember the look on Daniel Ochoa's face when Michael Douglas hugged him and whispered 12 words that would carry him through the next 25 years. You are worth more than any suit. Don't let anyone tell you different. That's not just a good deed. That's a legacy. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone stand up for a stranger? I'll see you in the next one.